Hello students, good morning everybody. Finished your chutti? Good. So today we will start with the topic, that is duties of the Devadasis. The word Devadasi in Sanskrit or Devanagari in Tamil means servant of God. They were dancing girls dedicated to the service of God in temples. Detailed studies show that the system was prevalent in the continents of Asia, Africa and Europe also. It is believed that the Mesopotamia was the original home of this institution. There are references to it dating back to 2090 BC during the first dynasty of Babylon. In India, studies show that the system dates back to the Indus Valley civilization. Employment of Devadasis in the temples were an integral part of the religious services. Temples were the essential part of the medieval society. Temples during this period emerged as huge organization with vast lands, properties and employed many religious and non-religious functionaries. The growth in the economic sources of the temple led to the increase in rituals and festivals of the temple. The association of Devadasis in the temple was materially beneficial to the state and the temple. The inscription and literatures throw light on the history, growth and development of this system. Kautilya, the Sanskrit writer of the 4th century BC, mentions about the Devadasis engaged in temple services. The Ramgarh cave inscriptions of King Ashoka refers to a young girl named Satmukha, a servant of God. There are references to Devadasis in the 12th century literature in Kashmir. It states that King Jhalanka, son of Ashoka, gave 100 girls of his kingdom who were well versed in dance and music to serve in the Shiva temple. Rupinika was a dancing girl employed in the temple of Mathura. There were hundreds of dancing girls attached to the Somnath temple in Saurashtra. Assam and Bengal had many girls as Devadasis in their temple establishments. Kalidasa's work have reference in resounding of ankle bells of dancing girl at Mahakali temple at Ujjain. A reference of the 8th century AD states the employment of patras, that is dancing girls, of the Jain temple in Karnataka. In Orissa, the dancers dedicated to temples were called Maharis. This practice was prevalent in some form or other in Tamil Nadu during the Sangam age, and it became popular in the medieval period, that is 600 to 800 to 1800 AD. It is evident that the history of the Devadasi system was very ancient. It was practiced all over the world in different forms according to the nature and culture of the region. In India, it appears to be more pronounced in the Shiva temples. Subsequently, it found acceptance in Vishnu temples also. The earliest mention of a dancing girl is found in Rigveda, where goddess Usha is compared to a richly clad dancing girl. The sacred courtesan were known as Punchalis and they played important roles in the rituals. They were gifted to the rishis by the kings The Atharva Veda describes them as having the qualities of Gandharva and were known as Gandharva Grihitas. Upanishada mentions about the women attenders on king who help him in grooming and entertaining. According to Tantrika literature, woman and religion are inseparable. Courtesans played important role in the esoteric rites of the Tantra. In Natya Shastra, it is said that when Bharata was summoned to direct a dance drama to please the gods, he needed women actors and dancers. Hence, Bharata created Apsaras, who were the ancestors of the Devadasis. Later, in medieval Tamil Nadu, it became one of the dominant socio-religious institutions. Towards the end of the 5th and 6th century, under the patronage of Pallavas and Pandyas, who were influenced by the Bhakti movement and agamic tradition. It extended throughout Tamil Nadu under the liberal support of the Chola and the later Pandya. Even though the institution suffered during the Muslim invasions, it reappeared with greater vigor under the Vijayanagar and Maratha emperors in South India. It lasted till the beginning of the 20th century in this region. The Devadasi system was prevalent in ancient India along with the temple culture. The Agamas described about the different offerings of the deity during the daily or annual rituals. Gita, that is music, Vadya, that is instrument, and Nritya, that is dance, are very important among the offerings. For this purpose, musicians, instrumentalists, and the dancers were employed by the temple. The music and dance performed in the temple were ritualistic in nature. It was considered auspicious when girls performed dance in front of the deity. They were compared to the heavenly nymphs and Gandharvas. Mythical stories traces its origin to Urvashi, one of the celestial nymphs. The historical theory traces its origin to the courtesans and the captive women of the kings. Mythical origin. The earlier Tamil works believed that they descend from heaven and called them Vanavara Magalira. Poet Sangam works address them as Vanavara Magalira, nymphs of the Devas, and Katarainta Kannikala, that is divine girls. Later they were called Arambhayar, descendant of Rambha, and Devadasis believe that they are the descendants of the mythological dancers Urvashi, Rambha, Menaka, Vipula, and Tilottama. Rudra, in order to please the sage Kaushika, created Apsaras. His descendants were called Rudraganikas. The Rudraganikas have a very ancient family line. Socially, they were on a higher level and did not mingle with lower caste people. The Kamika Gana mentions about the origin and functions of Rudra Kanyas, who had received initiation from Lord Shiva and were reborn in this world to serve in the temples. The Rudraganikas and Rudrakanyas perform Shuddha Nritta for various rituals and functions in the Shiva temples. These mythical stories attribute a Puranic origin to the Devadasi systems. The next one is historic origin. Shilappadikaram mentions about the initiation and the first dance appearance, that is Arangetram, of the Devadasi. Just as kings employed armies, artists, and courtesans, for enhancing their pomp and pleasure. The temples engaged them for singing and dancing before the deities for ritualistic purposes. According to classical works in Tamil, these women were qualified in singing, dancing, and playing musical instruments. Some of these girls were captured by kings after a war and brought to the kingdom. Subsequently, temples were built after a victorious campaign, and these girls were employed in the temple services. The girls attached to the temple is said to have married the temple deity, where she offered service during the temple rituals. Since she was married to the god, she was not allowed to marry anyone. The Rajadasis who were attached to the court entertained the courtesans, royal family members, and were allowed to be the concubine of the court officers and ministers. They performed dance and music in weddings and state ceremonies. During the 7th and 9th century AD, South India was swept by the devotional revolution by the Shaivites and Vaishnavites. The Shaivite Nayanmars and the Vaishnavites always propagated the bhakti movement interspersed with music and dance. It was easy to reach the philosophy of the religion to the mass through the medium of music and dance. The music and dance rituals performed in the temples are prescribed in the agamas. The agamic and bhakti movement brought a drastic change in the society. Devotees took pride in dedicating their girls to the temple service to serve the god for a sure means of salvation. Convinced by their devotion and dedication, princes, priests, and the people joined them in their endeavor to bring about a socio-religious change in the society. This change slowly led to the development of a community called the Devadasi in Tamil Nadu. In the agamas, the duties of the Devadasis are prescribed. Assisting the priest in the temple rituals was considered a very important duty. Negligence in observing rituals were considered as the onset of bad luck. Proper worship was considered important to the well-being of the devotees. The Devadasis cult had the approval of society, hence there was a widespread belief in the positive aspect of the system. The kings of the Pallava dynasty who ruled South India during the 8th century AD were strong followers of these agamic tradition and laid the foundation for ritual worship in the temples. According to the agamas, the duties of the Devadasis were in accordance with the time cycle of each day. 4 ritual sessions of worship were performed in the temple, and the Devadasis took part in all of them. They cleaned the temple, sang and danced in praise of God, lit the lamps at the specific times. The Kumbha Aarti, that is pot shaped lamps, was performed only by the Devadasis in the temple. During this Aarti, it was mandatory to perform dance to the accompaniment of tawil, that is drums, and nagaswaram. Besides the daily puja, auspicious months had special rituals. The temple Brahmotsavam, that is annual festival, which lasted for 10 days and concluded with the procession of the temple car. The movement of the temple car in procession would synchronize with the music of Nadaswaram, Tawil, and dancing of the Devadasis. Talented girls in fine arts like music and dance were dedicated to the temples. They were known as Rishi Bataliyar, Deva Devaradiyar and Kutis, dancer, attached to the temples were classified into the following 7 categories. Dattai, that is voluntary dedication. Viruttai, sold herself to temple service. Prithai, that is dedicated by the family. Bhaktai, that is devoted to the deity. Rudayai, that is presented to the temple. Alankari, that is selected for temple service. And Rudraganikai, that is salaried employee of the temple. The girls performing in Shiva temples were called Rudraganikas and Rudranayaka. Rudrakanyas. The Agamas prescribe Shuddha Nritta to be performed during rituals. Rudraganikas were adept in performing Shuddha Nrityam. Kamika Gamas mentions 2 classes of Rudraganikas and their origin and duties in the temple. They were believed to be the descendants of Apsaras and their families were called Rudraganika Kulam. During the medieval period, both royalty and nobility considered it meritorious to dedicate girls to temples. During Chola time, it was believed that this would ensure a long life for the king, queen and their children. Inscriptions read that 400 dancing girls were dedicated to Bradeshwara temple at Tanjore. Musicians recited sacred songs and the dancers danced and performed their duties here hereditary, which is evident from an inscription of Siddhilinga Mantapuram. This inscription reads that after the performer's death, her descendant or a qualified dancer from her family should continue the tradition of dancing before the processional deity. In case none is qualified, the Nyayanthara, that is supervisors of the temple, can elect an eligible person to perform. The dancing girls were marked with symbols to indicate their affinity to the temple. The temple dancers in the Banapuram Shiva temple were marked with sulams, a symbol of Shiva, during the time of Kulotungala. The different types of kuthus and such as Tamik-Kuta, Arya-Kotu, Sannika-Kotu were performed by different categories of Devadasis. Santi-Kuthu, both in solo and group, were performed by Rishabha Taliyars, the descendants of Sri Kanta Kumbha attached to Tirunallur temple, and the brothers had the right to perform different varieties of kuthu during the temple festivals. It is quite interesting to know that these artists were provided with sufficient provisions for the makeup. A grant named Sakkaikani was allotted for the supply of rice flour, oil, betel leaves, ghee and so on, which were used in the makeup of the artist who performed the kuthu. According to inscriptions, the best performer was called Talai Koli, that is prime Dona. Talai Kola is the sacred staff representing Jayanta would be handed over to the dancer after several rituals. The talented awardee becomes a Talai Koli categorization and classification on merit had also come into vogue. An inscription assigned to the period of Parantaka refers to Mummudi, Chola and Talaikoli. Besides the royal court, it is evident that trade organizations like Nana Desi had also taken interest in promoting the art and conferred title to the best dancer as Nana Desi Talaikoli. Temples particularly took interest in promoting the art and conferring on the artists their own chosen titles. For example, the title Ayaran Sundara Talaikoli was always attached with the temple Iyaprappan. A commentary on Takkayaga Parani says that it was conferred on those Ganikayas who performed the Sokkanritta in front of Lord Shiva. The expert dance masters received the greatest honor, Talai Kolasan, and the experienced dancer was called Talai Kolarivati. The dancers were given the titles like Nakkam to be prefixed with their names. The dancer named Nakkan Talai Lagiyars Alice Panchavana Mahadeviyar held an honored position in the court. Rajaraja, his son Rajendra, built a Palippadai in her honor. Traditions of the Devadasis. Girls born into a Devadasi family were entitled to be dedicated to temples. This event was done between the age of 6 and 9. The girl's mother, already attached to the temple, would recommend the girl to be accepted by the temple authorities to serve the temple. On an auspicious day, the girl would undergo fasting and be escorted to the temple by the eldest Devadasi. In the evening, the girl would be dressed like a bride in a sari with jewels and taken a procession with Nagaswaram accompaniment. After the procession and puja rituals, the girl would be seated near the sanctum sanctorium. The priest would perform puja for the sacred yellow thread with the gold thali. The thali would be handed over to the girl's mother to tie around the neck of the daughter. This symbolizes that the girl is married to the deity of that particular temple. This ceremony was called Pottu Kattaradu. Then the girl would be taken to the mandapam, a hall at the outer precinct of the temple. This marriage ceremony would last 3 days and the expenses for this would be borne by the temple treasury. The girl's upper arm would be tattooed with the symbol of the temple and would end the wedding ceremony. The girl would then exhibit her talent through a performance. If she is a dancer, she performs Salangai Puja, that is Gajja Puja and Arangetram. If she is a musician, she will perform a Kacheri Arangetram, a formal professional concert. It is common that the priest would have the first claim on the girl, but in many cases a rich merchant in the society would be the girl's patron. Followed by an elaborate feast, the pottu is removed and kept in a safe place till she comes of age. If she belongs to a Shiva temple, then she would be taught the Panchakshara, and if to the Vishnu temple, she would be taught Om Namo Narayana. The Guru, who taught her would be gifted with flowers, fruits, money, etc. The guru played an important role in molding her artistic talent. After her puberty, it is announced to the public. This event would be celebrated at a 10-day festival. The priest gifts her with a sword or spear, with which a formal wedding would be performed. She would retire to her private chamber along with this symbol, pronouncing her union with God. Her formal arangetram in dance would be conducted at the temple, after which she would perform the Kumbha Aarti to the deity. All the 10 days she would perform for the public in different costumes. During these days, a number of prospective men would be invited for her attention so that she may choose one of them and her life companion. This relationship was only for her financial security. Children born of this union will not inherit the father's name. Some Devadasis had only one such relationship all their life. Devadasis were known as Nritta Sumangalis, as they were wedded to God, the immortal. Legendary dancers have carried this legacy in many prominent temples. To name a few, Paravai Nachiyar, Sangli Nachiyar and Manikka Nachiyar of Tiruvayur temple have been praised in Periyapuram of Sekiazhar. Royal dynasties and Devadasis. The fame and fortune of dancers and court scenes rose and fell with the royal dynasties of the region. The early Pallavas and Cholas and Pandyas, who ruled between 7th to 13th centuries, laid the foundation for a great civilization. Great temples were built and every kind of intellectual and artistic activity flourished. The Sanskrit text Samrajya Lakshmi Pitika of the Maratha period, that is Samrajya Lakshmi Pitika by Vasudeva Shastri and K.S. Subramanya Shastri, mentions the court dancers as Lasya Kala and their dance to bring prosperity to the king and kingdom also. The dance hall was called the Lasya Shala or Natya Shala. The Natya Shalas were adorned with the sculptures of Apsaras and Natyadi Devata. The dancers offered Kusumanjali to Natyadi Devata before the commencement of the performance. According to this text, the distinction between temple and court dancers continued up to 19th century AD. After the decline of Tamil dynasties, the Devadasi system faced the struggle for existence. The wealth from the temples and courts were taken away by the Muslims invarids from North India. Due to lack of patronage, the professional communities suffered. The emergence of the Vijayanagar rule in South marked the reformulation of the system. The system flourished even during the Maratha period. The political instability in the states with the instruction of the British rule showed a deep decline in the system. There were frequent transfers of Devadasis between the temples and were distracted from their sacred principles of divine services. There was no royal patronage and many of them faced poverty. They were criminalized as prostitutes and the system was totally degraded. The Devadasis were not organized as a separate caste. The system had an accumulation of girls from different caste, regions and customs. Within the system, they had hierarchy of caste. For example, girls from higher caste were allowed to perform ritual roles and others had only the secular. They were called by several names as Tevanar Makkal, Tevatachi, Petiyar, Adikalamanar, Manikkatar, Kanikkayar, Koyil Pengal, and so on. The community called themselves as Isai Velalars. By the end of 19th century, many of them detached themselves from the temple since it could no longer support them. Some of them became music, dance teachers, professors, worked in the government and private administrative sectors, and other prostitutes. Reformists stamped the Devadasi system as a social evil. The collapse of the temple system, the lack of patronage and social negligence altogether put an end to the Devadasi system in South India. So, we have gone through the history of Devadasi system till now.